Chapter 1, Learning the Truth. Naruto Age 7, Night of the First Year Exam, Forest of Konoha. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Several hundred clones appeared and the forest was covered in a sea of orange jumpsuits and bright yellow hair. Iruka and Mizuki sweated at seeing so many shadow clones. Before the clones descended upon Mizuki in a huge mass. 12 minutes later the clones had all dispelled and only Iruka, the original Naruto and a now severely beaten and bruised, unconscious Mizuki remained in the clearing. There were a few moments of silence, before Naruto collapsed, orangey-red chakra flickering around his body, and began to scream in agony. Sarutobi Hiruzen, the Sundaime Hokage of Konohagakure no Sato, was watching the scenario through his crystal ball, Anbu on hand to intervene if necessary. However, when he saw the red chakra that was beginning to cover Naruto, he immediately shunshined to the area. Arriving at the scene, he ordered 2 of his Anbu to take Iruka to the hospital and Mizuki to the Tiana department, the others setting up a perimeter around the clearing. The Sundaime then tried to touch Naruto in order for him to try and assess his condition, but when his hand got close the red chakra leapt towards it, burning it slightly. The Sundaime sighed heavily, rose, and upon sending an Anbu to gather some of his most trusted Anbu, resealed the scroll of seals and settled down for a long wait. In Naruto's mindscape, all of a sudden Naruto felt cold water, but none of the blinding pain that he had felt moments before. He quickly stood up and realized that he was standing what looked to be a sewer-like structure. How the hell did I get in here? He thought, utterly bewildered. He looked around for some sort of way out, and saw that there were 3 huge pipes hanging from the darkness above him. The one on the left was dark silver, almost gray, the middle was black with streaks of red flowing through it, and the third, on his right, was a bright pulsating red. Slightly unnerved by the last one, but figuring that he didn't have any other ideas on where to go, he followed the pipes into the gloom. Naruto soon arrived at a rather large open space, and as he moved further into the gloom he quickly came upon what looked to a series of huge vertical columns, continuing on further than he could see on either side of him. On the column directly in front of him was a large piece of paper with the kanji for seal on it. However, what intrigued Naruto was not the meaning of the huge columns but what he could see on the other side of them. There were 2 women, both seated on a couch watching a television screen. They both looked almost exactly the same, both had flowing red hair, and were clearly women who had seen battle. However, the second woman had 2 major visible differences compared to the first woman, in that she possessed 9 foxtails and had a pair of fox ears on the top of her head. "Who are you?" The words leapt unbidden from Naruto's mouth before he could stop them. Both females looked up, the first in utter glee and excitement, the second in slight anguish and sorrow, but with both there was a vague feeling of apprehension. Naruto immediately started to cringe. Now that he had drawn attention to himself, there was no way he could leave unharmed. "Naru-kun." The first woman had leapt up and was rapidly approaching Naruto, arms out wide, in a way that reminded Naruto of various people who caught him in order to let the others beat him. Naruto immediately backed away, trying to get away from the 2 women. The woman, seeing this, slowed to a stop, before tentatively reaching for Naruto's shoulder, and holding it gently. Once Naruto realized that the woman was not trying to harm him, he looked up and repeated his question in a hopeful tone. Kushina was trying her best not to exude killing intent at the way her son reacted to the presence of another person. "I knew that they hated him," she thought. "But obviously it has gotten worse over the years, to the point where he shuns human contact. What did they do to him?" As she gently wrapped Naruto in a hug, she answered his initial question. "Naruto, I am your mother Uzumaki Kushina, heiress of the Uzumaki clan, and Konoha's Red Death. The other woman over there is Kyare, although she is better known by her title, Kyubi no Yoko." "But didn't the Yondaime kill the Kyubi 7 years ago?" Naruto asked, understandably confused. "Naruto, Kyare is a Baijuo, and the greatest of the tailed beasts. It is impossible for anything less than the gods themselves to permanently kill a Baijuo. If she did die then she would just spend a period of time out of this world before coming back. So the Yondaime resorted to the last thing any parent would do. He sealed it within his son," Kushina explained patiently, thinking that Naruto knew of his father at least. "So, if she was sealed within the Yondaime's son, then where is he and why is she in a sewer?" Naruto asked, not having made the connection. "Naruto, this is no sewer, we are within your mindscape," the second woman, Kyare, spoke up suddenly, seeing that Kushina was having difficulty saying it. "But, if we are within my mind, then that means the Kyubi was sealed within me," Naruto said, utterly relieved to finally know the truth behind why he was treated so horribly. It took a few seconds before the full import of his mother's words hit him. "Wait, do you mean that I am the son of the Yondaime?" Naruto shouted, absolutely aghast with shock. "Yeah, you're Minato and my son," Kushina exclaimed with glee. "Why did no one tell me this?" Naruto asked, slightly hurt that his Gigi, the son Daime, had lied to him about his parentage. "Well, I knew that it was necessary for your parentage and your ancestry to be hidden from the general populace, otherwise you would have had so many assassination attempts on your life, as Minato and I made plenty of enemies during the last Shinobi War, but I thought that you would know. When you meet Hiruzen, can you ask him to come into the mindscape so I can beat the crap out of him for hiding everything from you?" Kushina asked with a manic look in her eyes. "Hold on, what do you mean my parentage and my ancestry? I can understand the parentage part, but do you mean to say that I am related to other great figures of history?" Naruto asked in a joking manner. "Yep, on my side your grandfather was Uchiha Madara, relating you to both the Uchiha and Uzumaki, and your father, and therefore you, was a direct descendant of the Senju, with both the Shodaime and Nidaime Hokages being your great-grandfather and great-granduncle respectively. You also inherited the bloodline of each family." Kushina listed casually, examining her fingernails. Naruto did the best thing he could upon learning his ancestry and the fact he had bloodlines. He fainted. Waking up 15 minutes later, Naruto took several seconds to remember his conversation with his mother before he fainted. "It's completely mind-blowing," he thought, "to think that barely 6 hours ago I was trying not to let my mask slip in front of the rest of the class when I failed the first-year exam, and now I have met my mother and the Kyuubi, learned of my heritage and been told that I am directly descended from 3 of the Hokages." Kushina and Kyare, seeing that Naruto had woken up, paused the recording that was on the television screen and moved towards him. Naruto, seeing the Kyuubi in human form coming towards him, was decidedly curious about the being. He knew that just because it looked like a girl, doesn't mean it necessarily was one. "So considered how you have acted since I came here, I get the feeling that you aren't exactly the insane, bloodthirsty demon you're made out to be, are you?" Naruto asked, abruptly getting straight to the heart of the matter. "Well, no, I'm not. We Baiju are almost exactly like humans except that we are immortal, use Yuki and have several different forms," Kyare summarized tentatively, before continuing, "I also wish to apologize to you, seeing as I was the cause of your father's death. Before we get round to that, can you perhaps explain to me why you attacked Konoha in the first place?" Naruto asked, eyes piercing. "To do that we will need to start at the founding of Konoha, at the battle at the Valley of the End between Senju Hashirama, Uchiha Madara, and an unknown assailant that managed to match both of them at once. The truth is that Hashirama and Madara were actually the best of friends, and as much brothers as Hashirama was with Tobirama, his biological brother. However, due to the power that Madara had gained, the Uchiha clan elders tried to blackmail Madara into betraying and destroying the Senju, but Madara refused, and was forced to flee. Hearing the rumors that the Uchiha elders had spread, Hashirama killed them in his fury and went after Madara. Together they met before a man wearing a circular orange mask interrupted them, and together they fought against him. In the battle Madara summoned me to help them fight, but the unknown man had a method with which to control me, yet I am still unable to fathom as to what that is." Uzumaki Mito, who had followed her husband, saw me about to be turned against Madara and Hashirama, and using her skills at Fyu and Jutsu, sealed me into herself. All 3 of them survived the battle with the men, although both Hashirama and Madara were left as merely shadows of their former selves. Madara went into hiding, thinking that the man would come after him and not being able to return to Konoha, and settled down. The woman he married about 5 years later was an Uzumaki, as both the Uzumaki and Senju clans knew the truth of what happened on that day. This woman, Uzumaki Kirina, eventually gave birth to your mother 13 years later. Both Madara and Kirina were able to take on the cage and defeat them easily, even though Madara never quite regained his former strength. Raising your mother in Nozoshiogakur no Sato, village hidden in the whirlpools, and the Uzumaki clan home, she was a prodigy that had never been seen before, only later being surpassed in her earlier years by the Yondaime Hokage, Uchiha Itachi, and Hatake Kakashi. However, when she was 8, a combined force of Iwa and Kumonin attacked Tozoshio. Both of your grandparents fell in the battle for the village, which lasted for 2 weeks before it ceased. The attackers had been decimated, barely any of them survived, but the only survivor of the attack was your mother, Kyare reminisced. Kushina then took up the story. I traveled to Konoha, seeing that we were allied with it at the time, and carried the secrets of Ozushio with me. The instructions on our secret ninjutsu techniques, our use of Fuuinjutsu, and the scroll for our Kenjutsu styles, most of which rank among the deadliest styles known. When I arrived there, it seemed a person or persons within Konoha saw this as an opportunity to gain power and poisoned Uzumaki Mito, who had outlived the majority of her generation. Over the next 4 years Mito was dying from the poison within her body. The only thing slowing it was her skill with Fuuinjutsu. Over these years she taught me everything she knew, especially Fuuinjutsu and Kenjutsu, to the point where my ceiling was beginning to rival hers and I had become the foremost Kenjutsu student within the village. She also taught me politics and economics, even jutsu creation. Then she died, but before she did Kyare was passed on to me, as only the Uchiha, Senju or Uzumaki can control the power of Kyare, Uchiha through their eyes, Senju through Makuten, although only Shadaime had the necessary affinities. The Uzumaki are able to control Kyare's chakra either through using their own seals, or using an ability that all Uzumaki can learn called chakra chains. Thus it makes sense that we would be the ones to carry Kyare. Okay, so I know how I am related to the Uchiha, but how am I related to the Senju, specifically to the Shadaime and Nidaime, through dad? Well, no one knows, but it is presumed that Minato's father was probably the son or grandson of the Shadaime, who died sometime during the gap between the Second and Third Shinobi Wars. After the Second Shinobi War he simply disappeared off the map. Kushina answered in a rather annoyed tone. Okay, Naruto said brightly before quieting once again. Both Kushina and Kyare simply waited, as they knew that Naruto would be in the middle of some heavy thinking right now, and would eventually have more questions to ask. The silence continued for about 5 minutes before Naruto spoke up once more. Kachan, Naruto started tentatively, if I am related to the Senju and Uchiha clans, wouldn't that mean I would have their bloodlines? I was wondering when you would get around to asking that, Naruto. Kushina smiled at her son, as the answer to that is yes. In fact you have 3 bloodlines. What? Naruto was actually asking the question to try and dispute the fact that he was related to all these legendary people, but this made his mind crash to a halt. You have 3 bloodlines, Kushina repeated. You have the Sharingan, the Uchiha bloodline for me. Kushina demonstrated, activating her own 3 Tomoe Sharingan. You have large amounts of highly efficient chakra, allowing you to spam high-level jutsus and have an insanely increased lifespan. This even allows us to create solid things purely from chakra, from shuriken and kunai too, if one has enough chakra, even a house. The final bloodline you inherited is from the Senju, and is the only known skill bloodline. Usually bloodlines are categorized into 3 sections, Dujutsus, chakra bloodlines, and body bloodlines. However, the Senju bloodline is none of these, although it is heavily related to a chakra bloodline. The Senju bloodline allows a member to completely master and take the field of ninjutsu that they study to unprecedented heights. For example, the Shadaime chose elemental ninjutsu to master and took his earth and water affinities to the point where he could combine them into his legendary Makuten, while his brother also chose elemental ninjutsu. He only had a water affinity but completely mastered the essence of water. Your father chose space-time ninjutsu, but was also very good at chakra manipulation, while Tsunade of the Senin specializes in medical ninjutsu. Naruto's mind was in complete and utter shock at the thought of having such great bloodlines. With all of these 3 bloodlines alone, Naruto has the potential to be the greatest shinobi in history, discounting the Rikudo Senin. Both Kushina and Kyare had these thoughts running through their heads. Wait a minute. Naruto spoke up once more. If I had these bloodlines, wouldn't someone have noticed by now, or something happen? Ordinarily that would have been the case, especially with your Uzumaki and Uchiha bloodlines, but that damn seal that was on your back delayed the onset of your bloodlines and limited your capabilities to being pathetically weak. It even blocked off more than half of your brain's cognitive capabilities, Kushina answered in a disgusted tone. Is there any way we can get it off from here? Naruto knew there was no point panicking. We've already taken it off. That's what the pain was when you passed out. It was a real bug or two, Kushina consoled understandingly. There's no way she would want an unknown seal on her either. It seems we have strayed a bit off topic on how I came to be sealed within Naruto. Kyare, it seems, was a bit impatient to explain the truth to Naruto. So we have, well, you can finish the story, as it is more about you and I can explain more about myself to Naruto later. Kushina acquiesced to Kyare's request. After Mito died I was sealed within your mother, as she and the Senju agreed it may have been best to keep it from the Uchiha, whose ties with the Senju were starting to fray. Once I was sealed within Kushina, We became very good friends with each other, as I had with Mito. Skipping forward to the night of your birth, Kushina was in labor when a masked man assassinated the guards around the area. This masked man revealed himself to Minato and Kushina. He used you as blackmail to leave Kushina facing him alone, while your father was getting you to safety. This was more than enough time for the masked man to defeat and constrain her, and he began to pull me out of her body. Once he controlled me and forced me to attack Konoha. Your father resorted to using Fuuan jutsu that he had devised to seal me within you. The seal he devised was the only of its kind, as it is slowly taking my Yuki, and transforming into your chakra, thus constantly increasing your chakra reserves. But the reason I explained earlier about the battle at the Valley of the End was because the masked man wore the exact same mask as that man did, so obviously it is either the same man or some organization. Kyare looked down before continuing. It was due to me that you lost any chance of having a father, so I beg for your forgiveness. There was a moment of silence following these words as Kushina had lost the ability to speak and Naruto was perplexed as to why she would ask for such a thing. Kyare-chan, there is no need for you to ask for forgiveness as you did not have a choice in attacking Konoha. The masked man is to blame for my father's death and the destruction it wrought on Konoha. Naruto said, hugging the demon in human form. Kyare began crying as she hugged Naruto before smiling. Naruto, I promise I shall help you to the best of my abilities in whatever endeavor you make as long as it is involved in fighting or training. Naruto was shocked that Kyare had made such promise to him. However, before he could respond he felt a tug, trying to draw him from his mindscape. Well, it seems they are trying to wake you up, Naruto. Okay, when you wake up tell the Sandaime that you know the full truth about your heritage, parents and Kyare. He should know what to do. Also, know that the seal is gone. We shall be able to speak to you while you are conscious, and ask if you can bring him and those he trusts and like you into the mindscape to make it easier to explain things, Kushina said in a rush as Naruto began fading back to the conscious world. Konoha Hospital, 1.5 hours later in real world. Vibrant blue eyes blearily opened to see the masked face of the dog Anbu shaking him softly in desperation. A few moments later the Anbu stopped, seeing that Naruto's eyes had opened, and stepped back silently. Naruto glanced around what seemed to be his bed within the hospital to see the Hokage, and dog, cat, snake, raven, weasel and turtle masked Anbu gathered around his bed. The Hokage, seeing dog step back, realized that Naruto had woken up and moved swiftly over to him. Naruto, I must know what happened, Hiruzen said in a rather stern tone. Jigi, I need to talk to you in private with those you trust and like me, which are probably only the 6 Anbu that are here, Naruto said quietly. The 6 Anbu pricked up at this news. Before Kat ended up asking the question, how were you able to tell we were there? There's no way you should have known. I don't know how I knew, I just did. It was like there was an energy that I could sense within each of you, Naruto explained apprehensively. Ah, so it seems Naruto is a sensor ninja, Hiruzen thought with slight wonderment. Well, then, can you tell us if there are people eavesdropping on us? The Hokage asked, although he was also checking with Snake, who also had a similar sort of ability. Naruto was quiet for a moment, before speaking up. Jigi, he said quietly, there is someone using chakra 2 windows down, and directing the chakra to this room. Immediately 2 of the Anbu, Raven and Weasel, disappeared in blurs of speed. The Hokage, Anbu and Naruto heard the sounds of a light scuffle before they reappeared within a man, bound and unconscious between them. The Hokage, seeing the root insignia on the man's blank mask, immediately ordered Kat to send for Inoki, the best of the Yamanaka mine walkers, and head to the Yamanaka clan. After Kat had disappeared with a Shunshine, he ordered Raven, Dog and Snake to stay with Naruto, before he, Weasel and Turtle Shunshined away as well. Before long Naruto was fast asleep and the 3 remaining Anbu had dispersed themselves around the room. As Raven watched over the sleeping child, she considered what to get Naruto for his birthday in a few weeks' time, as October the 10th was rapidly approaching, but she and the Anbu guarding Naruto knew what a dangerous situation Naruto's birthdays were, so they got him presents a few weeks early. She, along with Snake and Weasel, were setting the date to give Naruto presents as September the 29th, while Cat, Dog and Turtle were setting theirs for the 30th, a mere day later. And it was October, the month where Naruto spent most of his time hiding out and scrounging for food, although the majority of the Anbu tried their best to help him, even giving rooms for the night. As Raven listened to the sounds of merchants plying their trades in the market, she realized that it was almost time for the traders to return to Konoha, as they came on a seasonal basis. Knowing that the traders adored Naruto for his sweet attitude, she came to the conclusion that she would be able to get Naruto something good and unusual, at the same time as making a bargain as they lowered the prices of their wares for Naruto. In fact, if she could get Naruto to come along with her and browse the wares for what he wanted himself. Conveying her plan to Dog and Snake through hand signals, they had to admit it was a good plan, and made a note to inform the others when they returned. Around half an hour later and informed the Anbu of their results with a root member, Inoiki had walked through his mindscape and found evidence of some of Danzo's dealings. They then had formulated an infiltration which revolved around Dog putting a hidden tracking seal on the man and erasing the man's memories of his capture and inserting false information. This was done to make it seem that there was only normal things that involved Naruto and allowed them to find Danzo's root bases within the city. Hiruzen took this precaution, as Danzo had always been highly interested in possessing Naruto in order to turn him into one of his mindless automatons and gaining more power behind him. As he considered this, he was overcome by anger at how far Konoha had descended from its original values and swore that it was time to regain control over the city. As the Anbu listened to their Hokage, they could see quite clearly that the Kami no Shinobi was back. Early next morning, Hokage's office. Hiruzen frowned as he sent away 2 Anbu teams to send for his 2 students Jiraiya and Tsunade, to come back to Konoha immediately, even authorizing his Anbu the use of deadly force in order to retrieve them. He was planning to get them back into Konoha to replace his current advisors, as he knew that the council elders were the source of him losing most of his power after Minato died. After the goal was completed, he was going to slowly regain most of his power, as with Tsunade and Jiraiya as his advisors he would have their support, and he would be able to rebuild Konoha to its former glory. His main concerns were the number of secrets held within Konoha, the running of the academy, and the descent of the hospital, along with the loss of many shinobi that specialized in areas outside of taijutsu, ninjutsu, and genjutsu. He was also going to go over many of the laws regarding the shinobi bloodline clans, especially if they were down to their last few members, such as the Yuki clan survivors that teams of Anbu and Naruto had retrieved from the Kiri bloodline purge, along with other such clans. After scribbling down some ideas for the adjustments he was going to make to Konoha's shinobi system and filing them within a secret drawer in his desk, he lit his pipe and leaned back in his chair to consider his most recent issue, Naruto. If the boy had made contact with his tenant, then things were going to be a lot more difficult, both in getting Naruto to trust him and in keeping the civilians from killing him. Hiruzen also considered the idea of labeling Naruto as a flight risk if he had, much as he wanted to avoid it. Hiruzen put his thoughts to one side as he heard clear knocks against the door, the knocks being in a slightly different rhythm that indicated it was the group of Anbu that was assigned as Naruto's bodyguard. "Enter," Hiruzen called briefly, mentally preparing for Naruto's loud entrance, as was usually the case. "Hokage-sama," the Anbu greeted as they entered the office, while Naruto greeted him the same as usual, just slightly quieter. "Right, Naruto, I believe you have something to tell me," Hiruzen said as he watched the boy sit down. "And I will tell you, but can you send the other Anbu out of the room first?" Naruto replied evenly. Hiruzen did so as he would still have 6 Anbu in the room with him, and Naruto wasn't likely to try anything. "Gigi, are you sure you have sent out all the other Anbu?" Naruto had sensed another person, who seemed to be in the air vents. The Hokage nodded slowly, and Naruto leaned over to Dog and said something to him quietly, who twitched slightly, showing her surprise before moving quickly. Reaching into the air vent, Dog dragged him out and knocked him out before he could react, revealing another root member, clearly with the intention of eavesdropping on the Hokage's meeting. Hiruzen ordered Turtle to take the man quickly to the T&I department and repeating the same process as they had yesterday. After Turtle was gone, the Hokage walked to a wall and activated a privacy seal to make sure that no one would be able to eavesdrop on them. Naruto then began to tell the story of what had happened last night, from his desperation at failing the exam, up until he met his mother and Kyari in the seal. He then asked the 6 other people in the room to touch a part of his head. They questioned as to why he wanted them to do this, unsurprisingly, before he explained that his mother and Kyari were going to bring them into the mindscape so they could talk to them. Although clearly rather apprehensive, they did as he asked, and there was a flash of light from each of their hands as they touched Naruto's head. Within the mindscape, Naruto and the others appeared within the same part of the mindscape that Naruto first arrived in, and all apart from Naruto felt a shard of sadness and guilt when they saw the state of Naruto's mind. Finally it made them all the more determined to help the blonde. Naruto began to eagerly lead them towards Kyari's prison, as he had named that room-like structure in his mind, although in the beginning the others, Especially the Anbu were rather grudging of their situation. When they had reached the set of huge prison bars, though they were even more tentative, as each of them had rather vivid memories of the Kyuubi when it attacked Konoha. All of them were stunned as they beheld Kushina and Kyorai behind the bars, apart from Naruto, who rushed forward, shouting, "Ka-chan, Kyorai-chan." Both women looked up eagerly at the boy who was racing towards them. They embraced him as he jumped into the arms of his mother before giving Kyorai a hug and lying down on the now vacated sofa. After introductions and the briefest explanations as to Kyorai's current form, they turned to Naruto to find that he had fallen asleep. "Poor boy, must still be exhausted from last night. The young do need a lot of sleep after all," Hiruzen chuckled, and the others smiled at the sleeping boy. "Anbu, I believe you can remove your masks here as we are among friends, and they can't tell anyone anyway, apart from Naruto that is, but he is going to know soon enough anyhow," Hiruzen said cordially. The Anbu proceeded to slowly remove their masks, one after the other. Raven was revealed to be Yuhi Kurenai, Snake was Mitarashi Anko, and Cat was Uzuki Yugao. Weasel then revealed himself to be Uchiha Itachi. Dog reached up ever so slowly to his mask, making everyone roll their eyes, before he removed his mask to reveal another mask. Everyone face-faulted at the sight. He then introduced himself as Hotake Kakashi, before the Hokage mentioned something about his true self. Kakashi released a genjutsu without any fuss, revealing a white-haired version of Kurenai and twin 3 Tomoe Sharingan spinning in either eye, as Ren had accidentally coded the Sharingan into Kakashi's DNA. Kakashi then reintroduced himself as Hotake Kaneko. However, she didn't get the reaction of surprise that she wanted his het teammates, and the Hokage already knew. She had told Kushina when she became part of Minato's Junon team, and the Kyuubi knew as she used her sense of smell to determine her gender under the Genjutsu Fyu and Jutsu combo. And Naruto, the only person who didn't know, was still asleep. The 7 humans and 1 Baiju then began talking of what they were going to do with Naruto's training and the treatment in his life so far. When the subject of his treatment came up, Kushina looked close to beating the crap out of the Sandaime, but refrained, as she understood that as the Hokage, there were limitations as to what he could do for Naruto. They settled that, as the hope for Naruto having a normal childhood was already ruined, he would be trained in secret by the 6 Anbu guarding him, along with Kushina and the Kyorai. When the Anbu and the Hokage learned the truth of what happened on the night of Kyorai's attack on Konoha, they were disbelieving at first, but after Kushina showed her own memories of the incident, they quickly forgave Kyorai. They concluded that Naruto would be trained privately by the Anbu in taijutsu, ninjutsu, genjutsu, and kenjutsu. He would also be training in his bloodlines with Itachi and Kushina, and he and Kaneko would both be learning Fyu and Jutsu from Kushina in the Mindscape. They finally concluded that he would also be training and controlling Kyorai's power with Kyorai, although all the Anbu had to be present when he did, in order for safety reasons. They knew that once word got out of who Naruto actually was, and the fact that he had 3 bloodlines, he would be hunted for almost the remainder of his life, unless he was strong enough to defend himself from some of the strongest shinobi on the planet. They then woke Naruto up and explained the situation. Although surprised that Dog was actually a girl, the fact soon paled in comparison of his emotions when he realized that he was going to be privately trained by his best friends. As at the time Naruto had around 2 months before the academy started again, there was no problem with Naruto be trained all day every day. Although everyone training him would never forget the look of sheer horror on his face when he first received his timetable from his teachers. Flashback. Naruto was unsure that they were intending for him to survive his training as he looked over the timetable his senseis had handed him. The Hokage had allowed the use of his private training ground for Naruto's training, and all of the 6 Anbu were eager to be finally training their young charge. Monday Friday 5:30 Wake up, 75 push-ups, sit-ups and squats, 20 laps around training ground with Guy. 6:15 to 6:30 shower and breakfast. 6:30 to 9:00 chakra control with Kakano and Kurenai. 9 o'clock to 12:00 ninjutsu with Kakano and Itachi or genjutsu with Kurenai and Yugao. 12 o'clock to 12:45 lunch. 12:45 to 3:00 taijutsu with Guy or weapons handling and traps with Anko. 3 o'clock to 6:00 Fyu and Jutsu with Kushina in Mindscape, accompanied by Kaneko. 6 o'clock to 7:30 academic studies on tactics and strategy, along with other academic theory. 7:30 to 8:00 dinner, wash up. 8 o'clock to 9:30 homework, personal training. 9:30 lights out. Naruto looked up at his teachers in complete horror, but Yugao, Seeing the face he was making and lips quirking in amusement gave him his timetable for the weekends. Saturday 6:30 Wake up, light warm-up 6:45 to 9:30 Kenjutsu basics and practice with Yugao 9:30 to 10:00 breakfast, shower 10 o'clock to 1:00 bloodline training with Itachi and Kushina 1 o'clock to 4:00 academic studies from the academy 4 o'clock to 9:00 free time 9:00 lights out Sunday 9:00 wake up, breakfast, shower 9:45 to 12:00 ninjutsu practice 12 o'clock to 9:00 homework, private training, and free time 9:00 lights out. Naruto looked at the timetable in shock, before grumbling under his breath knowing he needed this training, and that although it would be tough, it should also be really fun. Wait a minute, what about the academy? I mean, I can't be doing this when I need to go to the academy, Naruto asked. We will teach you a clone technique, called the blood clone, that will allow you to send a clone to the academy and learn the basic information there, such as history, which we don't have time to be teaching you. In many of your lessons with us we will be using the shadow clone technique that you learned from the Forbidden Scroll, as it retains knowledge that it has learned, including muscle memory, ninjutsu, chakra control and Fuin jutsu. In fact it retains pretty much everything apart from muscle training, allowing you to learn multiple things at once, Kanako explained, not taking her eyes off a small orange book that she was reading called Icha Paradise. As today is a Saturday we shall rest for the remainder of today, then tomorrow we shall be buying your equipment, such as shinobi clothes, practice weapons, sealing supplies, and books on chakra control, survival and cooking. The next day the training will begin, Itachi said, in a calm voice. Naruto saw a gleam of excitement within Anko's eyes that made him sure he had no idea what he had gotten himself into. On Monday morning he showed up at the Hokage's private training ground wearing the shinobi clothes that he had been bought yesterday, black combat boots, black pants that were tucked into the boots, black long-sleeve shirt that melded to his torso and arms and had a black hood, and a light gray combat vest with extra pockets, a high collar, and dark orange outlines. He had his kunai holster strapped to his left thigh, with his shuriken holster strapped to his right. As he watched Guy walk into the training ground with his onbu gear and mask on, he felt an irresistible urge that this was going to hurt. He was right, as 45 minutes later he was limping home trying to quicken his pace as his legs began to seize up. As he ate a healthy breakfast he internally groaned as he realized that if all his training sessions were like this, he was going to hurt like crazy tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that. In fact, he wasn't going to stop hurting. He heard giggles from his mother and Kyari as they heard his thoughts and he sighed. Having two people inside one's head made it difficult to keep anything private. He washed up his bowl, before setting back off towards the training ground for his chakra control session. Hopefully this one wouldn't be as physically exhausting. It wasn't, but it still hurt like crazy when he fell off the tree he was walking up and landed on his upper back, which happened several times. Then he had ninjutsu training with Itachi-sensei and Kakano-sensei, in which most of it was him and his clones reading about chakra theory, before they taught him to do a basic henge technique. Naruto quickly saw the possible applications in the technique, and made a mental note to his mother to remind him to send 50 henge shadow clones to the library on Sunday. Naruto then went home in order to have lunch, before returning for his lesson in kunai and shuriken handling and practice from Anko-sensei. It was pretty dull once one learned the proper way to throw kunai and shuriken, as after that it was pure repetition and practice, but Naruto stuck with it, knowing that it may one day save his life. Fuin jutsu with Kachan and Kakano-sensei in the mindscape was pretty fun, as he learned the basic kanji needed for beginner seals, although he had clones practicing perfecting his writing. The hour and a half of academic studies after that was slow and boring, but learning about the importance of strategy made him perk up, as he would do anything necessary to save the lives of his friends and family. All in all, by the time dinner came around he was both physically and mentally exhausted, and he still had hand seals to practice afterwards. Flashback end. It had been 2 years since the beginning of his training and Naruto had completely broken anyone's expectations of him, as he could now go toe-to-toe with Anbu captains. He would lose, but he could still give them a challenge. Anyone below that sort of skill level he could beat. His taijutsu was insanely strong, and he was creating his own personal style from a mix of Goken, the Uchiha Interceptor style, and the Uzumaki Phoenix style. His ninjutsu was impressive, as he knew various D.S. rank techniques for each of his affinities, which were water, lightning, wind, and earth. Although he had mastered his water, wind and lightning affinities, He still needed to work on his earth affinities, but had managed to combine his water and wind into ice due to his senju bloodline. His kenjutsu was at the point where he could go up against some of the top kenjutsu masters in the elemental nations and win, as he had, with the use of Kage Bunshine, perfected the Uzumaki style and dances, which were some of the best. His genjutsu, though impressive for his age and still better than most, was the weakest of his fields, as being the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi made controlling and fine-tuning genjutsu difficult. His Fuuin Jutsu was his most impressive field however, as he was considered equal by his mother to Uzumaki Mito, the best Fuuin Jutsu user in history. His Sharingan had 2 tomos in each eye, meaning that he could see chakra and see incoming moves, but couldn't copy the techniques of others. He primarily used his Uzumaki bloodline in order to be able to ride his seals in midair, and to create chakra chains in battle, although he occasionally used it to create wings of his chakra attached to his back and fly over Konoha. Things had gotten better in Konoha over the past few years. The Hokage had regained back most of his former influence in the village, the council elders had been retired and Tsunade had replaced them. Jiraiya had escaped from being an elder due to the responsibilities of his spy ring, although he had established a ring in Konoha to help the Hokage ferret out secrets within the village. Tsunade had, after some persuasion, returned to Konoha and replaced the 2 advisors, Homura and Koharu, along with being appointed the head of Konoha's hospital. She now conducted courses for potential medic nins along with her apprentice, Shizune, although she had become quite doting over Naruto, after learning that he was the last male senju. After the responsibility of the academy was placed back into shinobi hands, the courses were much more about them surviving the shinobi lifestyle than learning history or flower pressing. As such, many of the civilian children dropped out, especially if they were fangirls. By this time however, the Dobi Naruto had already been established and he didn't really care anyway, as he was years ahead of his class. His blood clone had a lot of fun skipping out on class and pulling massive pranks. Things had gotten so well that Kakano was able to fully take off her Kakashi persona without fear of being turned into a breeding machine by the civilian council. Finally, the most drastic thing that had happened was Danzo being run out of Konoha, as a few months ago the Anbu had finally moved against the hidden root bases within the village, as the Hokage had used the root he had caught against Danzo, amassing a huge amount of information on his activities. They had succeeded with capturing the majority of the root shinobi, but Danzo had managed to flee with some of his upper echelon. Naruto had used his Fuuin Jutsu to take off many of the seals on a captured root shinobi, and had managed to gain a friend, called Sai, who was now utterly loyal to Naruto. It was rather awkward when he started following Naruto around incessantly, but he believed that Naruto was worth it, as he knew Naruto had saved him from becoming a weapon. After a month, the Anbu shrugged and began training him too. Although Danzo's exile paled in comparison to the mission Itachi had to carry out 2 months ago, as he had to kill his father, Uchiha Fugaku and several other clan members after they had slaughtered the rest of his clan. Fugaku had escaped after he had used Tsukunomi on Sasuke, Itachi's younger brother, to convince him that it was Itachi that had killed the rest of the clan. After this, Itachi was forced to flee Konoha and be branded an S-rank missing nin, although he still received missions from the Hokage. At the moment he was on orders to infiltrate an organization known as Akatsuki, and had found out 3 key things about them. 1. It was an organization that was trying to protect the Jinchuriki of the Baijiu from another organization known as Kurai. 2. The leader of the organization possessed the Rinnegan, and 3. Orochimaru was part of the organization and was innocent of his crimes and Danzo was behind the inhumane experimentations. The only people who knew of Itachi's current situation were his former Anbu teammates, Naruto and Sai, the Hokage, Tsunade, and Jiraiya, and the shinobi clan heads. Itachi's information provided a link between Danzo and files that had been found in his quarters pertaining to the group called Kurai. Naruto, in Itachi's absence, had become good friends with his mother, Uchiha Mikoto, and had received a new sensei called Gekko Hayate, who was the second of Konoha's 2 sword masters, the first being Yugao. The 2 regularly went into Naruto's mindscape with him in order to receive kenjutsu training from Kushina, whose skill with swords had been legendary when she was around. At the moment Naruto, Sai, Kanako, Yugao, Anko, Kurenai, Guy, and Hayate stood in the Hokage's office, having received a visit from Anbu telling them to be here. Hiruzen looked at each of them, hoping to use this mission as a chance to get Naruto and Sai used to facing other shinobi, as both had done several C ranks as a pair, but he wasn't completely sure the 2 were up to it alone. "Alright, You 8 are here for an S-rank mission. The Sandaime started before he was interrupted. Jigi, are you feeling alright? Naruto asked. The idea of the Sandaime giving him an S rank at his age was preposterous. Naruto, I can assure you I feel perfectly fine. Now, as to what this mission entails, you have all heard of the current Kiri bloodline purge, is that correct? Receiving mute nods, he continued, they are eliminating bloodlines, and although we shouldn't interfere, I am sending you 8 to retrieve surviving members of as many bloodline clans as possible to bring them back to Konoha so they can live in peace. Priority clans are those that already had smaller dwindling numbers to begin with, as their bloodlines are the most likely to be eradicated. Due to our information from Jiraiya's spy network, we are able to give you the general locations for many bloodline survivor groups, but it is likely that these locations won't last for long, therefore you will have to split up into 2 teams. Jigi, why are Saiyan here, rather than more experienced Anbu members? Naruto questioned seriously, understanding the gravity of this mission. All of our Anbu that are experienced enough for this missions are out of the village, and you are very capable yourself, after all you two were taught by some of the best, Hiruzen explained. He didn't want to send Naruto out for this mission, but any less than 8 and they wouldn't be able to reach many survivors in time. You 8 will be handling extracting them from combat, while others teams will be extracting the ones in safety into Fire Country. You save a group, contact another team and move on. You'll be both saving lives and benefiting Konoha, Hiruzen outlined. You have 3 hours to prepare, and remember to take extra supplies as you will be going into a war zone, and that the injured may need them. The extraction force is gathering at the west gate. Naruto watched on in wonderment as 78 Anbu members gathered at the main gate along with him and Sai, a fair few of them being former Root members. It was the largest gathering of senior shinobi he had ever seen, and thankfully he didn't have to put up with disparaging remarks as both he and Sai had sparred a number of them and won. For this mission, they had both been given Anbu masks, Fox for Naruto, ironically, and Hawk for Sai. They had been put on a team with Kanako and Anko, while Yugao, Kurenai, Hayate and Guy formed the other combat team. The rumor of Naruto and Sai being trained by the top had circulated around Anbu, and they welcomed the two better than they did with most new rookies. Naruto withdrew one of his twin ninjato from a man's chest as the encounter ended. His team was outside of the Yuki clan compound in Karigakure no Sato, and were defending against waves of bloodline haters as 2 other teams evacuated the remaining Yuki clan members and cut their way out of the city to the rendezvous point. There were only around 15 adults remaining, along with around 25 children and babies. All the others were dead or had managed to flee. Kanako, Anko, Naruto and Sai moved on towards the Kaguya compound to find 2 or 3 clan members using their bloodline to become whirlwinds of death amongst the enemy ranks. Naruto had one thought as he watched their bones return to their bodies. Kanako moved forward announcing their presence and intentions to the clan members, who had rearmed themselves with bone swords until they saw the Konoha mark on their Anbu masks. Kanako and the clansmen agreed that her team would hold the entrance to the compound while they gathered their surviving members and waited for the retrieval teams to return. 3 minutes after the clansmen retreated within the compound to inform their clan head and begin to prepare, a group of around 30 bloodline haters showed up carrying torches to set the compound alight. Naruto sighed as he unsheathed his ninjatos and channeled wind chakra through one and lightning chakra through the other. He stood passively as 7 of the enemy shinobi charged him, until they got within 5 meters of him. Then he jumped onto the first man's shoulders, knocked him down to the ground, rolled and stabbed another through the chest. He didn't know that he had unconsciously used his Uzumaki bloodline and created wings of solid, blazing chakra behind him. The fight, lasting 2 days and a night, was later labeled Bonefires and earned him a place in the bingo book at the age of 9 as Deathly Angel. At the rendezvous point, several days later, Kanako's team walked wearily into the campsite they had labeled as the rendezvous point after retrieval was completed. They were covered in blood, having been fighting constantly for the last few days. They were the last team out, all the others already gathered, along with around 200 bloodline survivors of various clans, the biggest being the Kaguya and the Okami, a clan that possessed the wolf summoning contract. As the Anbu guarding the camp announced that the last team had arrived, they were given 3 hours to clean themselves up and prepare their equipment. Thankfully, due to the fact that their team and Yugao's team had the element of surprise on their side, neither had sustained losses, and the other teams had avoided contact and snuck their charges out of the village. As Naruto took a makeshift shower, he reflected that although they had retrieved all the survivors in the various compounds and those that were hiding out, there was still a high likelihood that some had escaped. He remembered the Yuki clan and decided that they, along with the Okami, were probably his favorite, as he had connections to both of them. Being the bearer of Kyari gave him a connection to the Okami, while his ice-style ninjutsu gave him a connection to the Yuki clan, as their bloodline allowed the use of ice style as well. Later, when the huge group began to move out towards Konoha, as all the survivors knew that Konoha treasured those with bloodlines and treated its shinobi as more than weapons, and pretty much all had agreed to live in Konoha. Naruto, Sai, and the rest of the Konoha Anbu spaced themselves out equally around the walking column, with Naruto being closest to the Yuki clan members, as Kanako already saw that he liked them. The column would stop for a break after 6 hours of walking, before going for another 6 hours. They could have traveled at shinobi speeds, but that would mean leaving the children and the elderly behind to fend for themselves, something that all refused to do. They arrived at Konoha's gates 2 weeks later, drawing the attention of many. As the survivors were setting up a camp outside of Konoha's walls, with Anbu guarding all inside against any that might do harm, a member of each clan was elected as clan head, who were then escorted to the Hokage's office by Kanako's and Yugao's teams. Opening the door to the office, Naruto and the others remained behind as the new clan heads engaged in conversation with the Hokage. Explaining the situation to each of the clan heads, Hiruzen outlined that they would be building new clan compounds in vacant areas within Konoha's walls, and that their clan's people were to be full-functioning citizens or shinobi of Konoha if they wished. The heads agreed. Before recounting their tales to the Hokage, their voices were full of admiration as they recounted their viewings of the two teams waiting behind them. When the Kaguya had mentioned the wings of chakra upon Naruto's back, Hiruzen almost sighed in annoyance, as there had been a recent bingo book entry just labeled Deathly Angel, which was seen fighting outside the Kaguya compound. Thankfully they didn't know his affiliation was Konoha. He made arrangements for the new heads of the new clans to meet the current clan heads of Konoha. He waited for them to leave while escorted by Anbu before allowing the others to come forward. "Remove your masks," he said, and they did so quietly, even Naruto knowing that this wasn't the time to talk out of turn. "Report, Kanako," and so she began. Hiruzen's mind turned to shock as he heard some of the battles won by Kanako's team. 4 of them against almost 150 sellswords were highly unreasonable odds, and ones in which it was quite likely they would have died, but they managed to pull through without any serious injuries. "Well, it sounds like the mission was more than successful, as you retrieved all available bloodline users without any serious injuries. Therefore each of you will receive payment for an S-rank mission and a C rank on top of that." The Hokage smiled and let them troop out so they could go home and get some rest. Naruto smiled as he lay on his bed after showering and eating. Sure, he had killed, but what mattered was that he and his teammates had made it through unharmed while simultaneously completing the mission. Over the past 3 years Naruto had been training in more and more advanced subjects. His taijutsu was equal to Gai's, he was wearing chakra weights that were on level 8 out of 20, and he had resistance seals level 5 out of 50. His ninjutsu variation was equal with Kanako's. He had finally mastered his earth element, and was now experimenting with mixing his affinities. He was going quite well with ice, as he had started to train with the Yuki clan, was starting to activate Makuten, and had even created an ultimate defense using both moving ice panels, and a swirling sphere of water, wind and lightning, which he liked to call his storm element. His kenjutsu was greater than that of the 7 swordsmen of the mist, and could combine it with both genjutsu and taijutsu. His genjutsu was on the level of a jonin, and he primarily used it in conjunction with his kenjutsu. His fuinjutsu was where he excelled. He had used seals and the creativity of his mind to solve many problems, creating entirely new structures. He had even invented something he called a hoverbike, which allowed for fast and easy transport and could be guided by the legs, leaving the hands free for other tasks, but he had yet to tell anyone, as he knew that allowing it for public use could have disastrous consequences. His Sharingan had each gained their 3rd Tomoe, but he rarely used it to copy techniques, though he did have a good look at the Uchiha library's lightning techniques. His Uzumaki bloodline, he started to think up new uses, such as using it for pure chakra techniques to create even more devastating versions. Naruto had done a lot more missions for when he got bored, or stumped on an idea, most of them being C or B rank missions that he did with Sai. Although he had also done a few more A and S ranks when it was needed. Sai had also advanced to the point where he could give most Anbu a beating. As such, they spent a lot of time looking for Jiraiya, when he was in Konoha, so they could have a spar. Naruto and Tsunade actually figured out another part of the Senju bloodline, which was that once an ancestor had reached a new peak in their field of expertise, all those directly descended from that person could reach that peak even if it wasn't their field of ninjutsu. The two were completely shocked by this find, as it meant that the longer the clan lived, the more powerful each member grew. They only figured this out when Tsunade reached the Nidime's level with her water affinity, in a spar, and both were too shocked to comprehend what had happened until several days later. Although Naruto had begun studying medical ninjutsu at a feverish pace, currently Naruto was getting dressed in what he had been using for almost the last 5 years: black combat boots, black pants, black long-sleeved form-fitting shirt with a hood attached that he used on missions, and a light gray combat vest with an orange Uzumaki spiral on the back. Both his pants and shirt had black non-reflective leather armor sewn on, and he had white bandages wrapped around his left thigh. He now had a pair of black leather fingerless gloves that had armor plates on the back of the palms. He also wore a mask like Kanako did that hid everything below his eyes. He had his twin ninja toes sheathed and strapped to his back in an X. Usually Naruto would be getting dressed like this for private training, but not today. No, today he was attending the graduation exams and was going to reveal his true self. This would be the first time he had gone to the academy personally in around 5 years, and he didn't miss it due to the memories of the blood clones he created. He had to say it, Sasuke was a complete and utter jerk ever since Itachi left, even to his mother. Kiba was both arrogant that he was a clan heir and too headstrong, while Hinata was almost the exact opposite. Shikamaru and Choji both had good potential but were too lazy to actually train. Then there was Shino, who was actually probably the best student there, apart from Sasuke, and the one who would become the next ninja. Then there were really just a bunch of fangirls chased after Sasuke, but two girls, Sakura and Ino, headed them, who had apparently ditched their friendship when they learned the other was going after Sasuke. Stupid. Naruto walked into the academy an hour and a half early, and sat in a chair next to the window. He then unsealed a violin from a storage seal on his vest, and began playing, unaware that Iruka had just walked into the room. The Chunin stopped for a moment before shrugging, as he knew that Naruto was receiving private training from Anbu, and could probably kill him relatively easily. As he sorted through papers on his desk to prepare for the exam, he listened quietly to the sound of Naruto's violin. There were several times when he could envision a situation and the music would fit perfectly, and a chill would creep down his neck. As the time passed, other students began to walk into the classroom only to stop in silence as they saw Naruto playing the violin, before sitting down silently. When there were only a few minutes to go until the bell rang, everyone in the classroom heard the sound of drumming feet. Outside, as both Ino and Sakura raced towards the door of their classroom, they heard the sound of music emanating from the classroom. Ah, it must be Sasuke who is playing the violin so beautifully, they both thought. Obviously he is feeling very emotional, so this is my chance to marry him. They both burst through the door loudly before screaming out, "Marry me, Sasuke-kun." The silence following this proclamation was stunningly loud, before Naruto spoke up. "If you're looking for the arrogant ass, he's behind you." "Sasuke-kun." Both of them ignored Naruto insulting Sasuke in order to greet him. Sasuke just walked past them silently. "Can you play the violin again for us, Sasuke-kun?" Ino asked eagerly. Sasuke just looked at her with a confused face before grunting and motioning with his head at Naruto. Both girls looked at Naruto, unsure why, but Sasuke had asked it, so why not? Then they saw the violin in his hands. "Naruto Baka, how dare you steal property from the magnificent Sasuke-kun, give it back right this instant." Sakura screeched loudly. "Why should I give it to him, when it's mine?" Naruto asked in a bored tone. "How could it be yours? You're just a no-good clanless orphan." This time Sakura was even louder. Before she knew it, Naruto had disappeared from his seat. She was lying on her back on the floor, and Naruto was standing over her, eyes burning in anger. "Just because I am the last of my clan, doesn't mean I am clanless," Naruto said in a voice thick with fury. And as he said those words, Sakura saw images of her own death. The next second he was back in his chair, with everyone staring at him. He tapped his foot impatiently, motioning for Iruka to get on with it and hand the written exams out. Iruka coughed. He hadn't been expecting such an angry reaction from Naruto when it came to his family. Before gathering the written exams from his desk and handing them out. "All right, you have 1.5 hours to complete the exam, do your best, and good luck. Your time begins now," Iruka said, starting the countdown clock. Everyone that wasn't Sasuke, Shikamaru or Naruto immediately turned the page over and began scrabbling furiously. Shikamaru calmly answered a few questions before going back to sleep, Sasuke wrote calmly as he worked his way through the paper, and Naruto wrote calmly and fast, finishing the test in 15 minutes before bringing his violin back out and playing for the remainder of the time. Iruka was about to criticize him for distracting the other students, but the words got lost somewhere along the way to his mouth. All the others seemed to be very reflective as they answered the paper, the last finishing with 5 minutes to spare. After each had finished, they listened to the sound of the violin silently. When the time finally finished, Naruto calmly put his violin away and allowed the gathering of the test papers to be quiet. Iruka announced after the papers were piled on his desk that they would now be moving out to the practice range to test their shuriken and kunai throwing. After that there would be a break for 45 minutes as he graded the written exams before they had the taijutsu tournament and finally the ninjutsu exam. As they walked through the academy to the practice range, it was unnaturally quiet, as many members of the class were thinking about how different Naruto was today. Meanwhile, Naruto was training in his sensor capabilities, and he had just found Sai, as he knew he would be following him, as the former root was very overprotective when it came to Naruto's emotions. He rolled his eyes and continued walking. The graduation class soon arrived at the practice range and each student had to throw 10 kunai and shuriken at a target. It could be all at the same time or one after the other. Many of the class got average results but managed to pass, although on principle the clan heirs and heiresses did better than students from civilian families. Finally it was the turn of one Uchiha Sasuke, and Naruto watched him closely to see exactly how much the boy had developed. The black-haired boy managed to get 8/10 for the kunai and 7/10 for the shuriken. Naruto summed up that he wasn't too bad but there were better, as the fangirls in the class cheered and screeched in support of their Sasuke-kun. Poor bastard. Uzumaki Naruto, Iruka called him forward. He strode over, picked up the shuriken and kunai, and in a flash of silver they were embedded in the center of the target. Everyone's jaws dropped, as he hadn't even been looking at the target, he had been reading a book. Naruto just went back to where he had been, leaning against a nearby tree. Everyone got over their shock as Iruka, who then quickly began walking back to the academy as he had a bunch of test papers to mark, announced the lunch break. Naruto just walked over to where he knew Sai was before engaging him in conversation. "You seem to be having fun," Sai commented. "How could I be having fun? I am so bored," Naruto whined, a bit like a child. "You seem to be having fun messing with their heads," Sai elaborated, grinning, a bit like a cat. "You bet." Some of the looks of shock. "I should have bought a camera." "Actually, I should have bought a camera," Naruto said, frowning in disappointment. The two of them continued to talk for the rest of the time, until Naruto had to go back to the academy for the tournament. "I would say goodbye, but I know you're just going to follow me so you can tell Anko-sensei how I did before I can," Naruto said, smiling. He knew his friend too well. Seeing his friend nod, he shook his head in exasperation before walking back to the academy. 3 minutes later he was rolling his eyes as Iruka explained the exam to the class. First they had to either survive sparring against him for 5 minutes, or beat him in those 5 minutes, before they would move on to the tournament. Many of the class suffered a few hits while sparring Iruka, even among the clan heirs, and no one managed to beat him, discounting Sasuke. Iruka called Naruto into the ring, and the blonde walked forward, slouched comfortably and pulled out the same book from before. Knowing that Naruto was trying to rile him up, Iruka stayed calm, and seeing that Naruto wouldn't be starting the spar, he charged. Naruto regarded Iruka lazily before disappearing in a blur of speed. The next second, everyone was watching as Iruka was trying to struggle futilely against a combination elbow-shoulder lock that Naruto had placed him in. He then tapped out, accepting the defeat. Naruto just strolled contentedly out of the ring, taking note of the jealous look that crossed Sasuke's face. The taijutsu tournament that followed was probably the most interesting part of the day as it allowed Naruto to see how the clan heirs reacted in certain situations, although he almost smashed his head into the wall when Shikamaru, after passing the rounds necessary to graduate, forfeited, saying it was just too troublesome to continue. Naruto passed through all of his fights easily, knocking out his opponents before they could react, using his insanely superior speed. Even his fight against Sasuke was a complete letdown, as one moment he was standing opposite Sasuke in the ring, the next he was standing where Sasuke had been, with the Uchiha unconscious at his feet. And the ninjutsu exam was a complete disappointment. It was taken in a different room, where none could watch and one only has to perform 3 basic jutsu. Naruto was walking out of the academy after he and the rest of the graduates were told to come here at 10 o'clock tomorrow to receive their team assignments. Naruto had already figured out who his demon sensei were going to be, Uchiha Sasuke and Yamanaka Ino, with their sensei being Kanako Ne-chan. Their sensei had to be Kanako as Sasuke was going to need training in his Sharingan and his mother was a retired kunoichi, therefore not technically allowed to train shinobi, and the only other person with the Sharingan was Kanako. Meanwhile his teammates had to be Sasuke and Ino as they were the rookie and the kunoichi of the year, which always gets put with a class dobi, in other words, him, thanks to his clone. Although he did wonder exactly how they planned to deal with Sai, who refused to be on a team unless Naruto was on the same team. As such he spent much of his time on solo missions nowadays, but he was scheduled to take the upcoming Chunin exams in Konoha. Naruto spent his time working on a personal project of his at the moment, creating a way to get rid of Anko Ne-chan's cursed mark of heaven. As he was unable to come up with any answers at the moment, he was too distracted, he decided to go to the Hokage's jutsu library to see if there was a technique that he felt like learning, or perhaps give him inspiration for his own. Naruto loved making new jutsu. It was so cool, especially since he could get a basic idea of one within a few hours and could begin thinking of viable hand seal chains within days. As such, several people, including the Hokage, labeled him a genius in the art. He had adapted several normal jutsus for wind into ice jutsus and was beginning to adapt lightning jutsus for his storm affinity. The next morning he strolled into the academy at 9:45. The only reason he was early was because he wanted to see what teams were assigned to Kurenai Ne-chan and Asuma. Otherwise he would have slept in a lot longer or gone off to Ichiraku Ramen. His blood clone had been right about that place, it was awesome. As he lolled in his chair in the classroom along with the other graduates while they were waiting for Iruka, Naruto could sense Kurenai and Asuma's chakra walking closer to the academy. No doubt he was bugging her again, the idiot. You see, as soon as Kanako had revealed her true self to Konoha, Asuma dumped Kurenai to go and see if he could get a date with her, and when he was denied, came back and tried to hook up with Kurenai again. He had been Jinjutsu'd into the hospital, and Kanako, Kurenai and Anko had become known as the three ice queens of Konoha. A side effect of his actions was that he earned the contempt of Naruto, and had received quite a few beatings from it too. Naruto sat up in his chair as Iruka announced the teams containing the clan heirs. Team 7, Uchiha Sasuke, Yamanaka Ino, Uzumaki Naruto, with Sai as attaché. Your sensei is Hatake Kanako. Team 8, Aburame Shino, Inuzuka Kiba, Hyuga Hinata, your sensei is Yuhi Kurenai. Team 10, Narashi Kamaru, Akimichi Ichoji, Haruno Sakura, your sensei is Asuma Sarutobi. Iruka then told them to remain here until their sensei picks them up. Within 5 minutes Kurenai was picking up her team, and Naruto could see the reaction on Kiba's face when he saw her and knew that he would be bugging Kurenai to marry him. No wonder Kurenai saw males as complete and utter idiots. Asuma then came in, and ordered his Genin to follow after him, give Naruto smug glances all the while. Soon the only team remaining was Naruto, who proceeded to talk apparently to thin air. You can come out now, Sai. Naruto, there's no one there. Ino had changed how she addressed him but felt the need to point this out. Sasuke just watched in contempt of who was on his team. That is until Sai dropped from the ceiling. You didn't need to make such a spectacular entrance. You're only meeting the two on our team, I give it a 7/10, Naruto commented. Sai pouted before snorting disdainfully and grumbling under his breath. Do you two know each other? Ino asked cautiously. So Naruto explained that they had been training together since they were 8, leaving out Sai's past with Danzo en route. The team proceeded to split back up. Sasuke was brooding, Ino was fawning over him, Sai began to draw in his book, and Naruto brought a steaming bowl of hot ramen from one of his storage scrolls. This was how Kanako found them 1.5 hours later, except that Naruto was reading a scroll on storm chakra control exercises. She looked in the doorway, having already checked that no pranks were in the vicinity, and smiled at seeing Sai and Naruto, who she considered younger brothers. Team 7, meet me up on the roof in 5 minutes, she announced before disappearing with the sunshine. Naruto and Sai followed her example, shocking Ino and Sasuke. Sai disappeared in the classic leaf sunshine, while Naruto did a combination of water and lightning. Up on the roof, both rushed to Kakano and hugged her, shouting in joy at seeing their Ne-chan again. Before Naruto asked her where she had been the last few days. Just an A-rank to destroy a bandit camp, Naruto and Sai nodded unconcerned, but before they could do anything more the door to the stairwell opened and Sasuke and Ino walked out onto the roof. Kakano immediately went into business mode. She might relax with her Atatos in private, but in public, especially on a mission, she treated them the same as all the others. All right, Let's begin by doing introductions. State your name, likes, dislikes, hobbies, specialities, and your dream. I will go first as Ino and Sasuke don't know me as well as you two. My name is Hitake Kaneko. I have a few likes, a few dislikes, a number of hobbies that you're too young to know. My speciality is in ninjutsu, but I can do moderately well in all the others, especially Fuinjutsu. My dream, well, I don't need to tell you that, Kaneko outlined with a straight face. Ino and Sasuke both had slight tick marks on their foreheads, while Naruto and Sai were desperately trying to control their laughter and failing. Kaneko then motioned for Sai to introduce himself, as he was the other unknown to the academy too. My name is Sai. I like training, drawing and Naruto and my senseis. My dislikes are Danzo, his root, traitors and rapists. My hobbies are drawing and hanging out with Naruto, including helping him with a few of his pranks. My speciality is ink-based ninjutsu, and stealth. My dream is to kill Danzo and his root, in order to protect my friends. Ino was a little curious and asked Sai why he disliked Root and Danzo so much. Kakano and Naruto knew that she was treading on precarious ground and Naruto quickly began to introduce himself before she pushed Sai to answer. My name is Uzumaki Naruto. I like my adoptive family, Sai, the Yuki and Okami clans, Kenjutsu, Fuinjutsu and training. My dislikes are the ways certain members of my adoptive family are treated or regarded by the public, rapists, lying bastards, the civilian council and Danzo. My hobbies are training in Fuinjutsu, Kenjutsu or ninjutsu, creating new jutsu, flying, creating new seals, playing my violin, and sparring with Uro-sennin when he's in Konoha. My specialities are in Kenjutsu, Fuinjutsu, ninjutsu, and taijutsu, along with my bloodlines. My dream is to become Hokage of Konoha in order to protect everyone I care about. Ino and Sasuke regarded him in shock before Sasuke spoke up. What do you mean, bloodlines? I have 3, but 2 are classified, so I can only show you the third, which is from the Uzumaki clan, and allows me to make solid objects from my chakra alone, due to its potency, Naruto explained calmly. Kaneko knew that if Sasuke learned of Naruto's Sharingan too soon, then he would react in a negative manner and become even more of a flight risk. She sighed internally. If they didn't tell Sasuke the truth soon, it was likely that he would abandon Konoha in search of a faster way to gain more power. She needed to talk to the Hokage. Kaneko, Naruto and Sai listened as Sasuke and Ino introduced themselves, and drew a rapid conclusion. The academy reports were correct. Sasuke was a power-obsessed Avenger, while Ino was a fangirl. It was the last one that made Kaneko groan. Half of the problems with fangirls was getting them to actually think about their crush logically. Alright, now that we have all introduced ourselves, I need to tell you that you aren't actually Genins yet, as you have one more test to pass. Kaneko loves seeing the shocked faces on graduates when they are told this. What? Ino was confused, very, very confused. But we passed the academy exam, so therefore we are Genins, aren't we? Not really, that was just to weed out the completely hopeless cases, who now attend one of the civilian schools. Meanwhile you have potential, but now you are being tested on whether you should be an active part in the shinobi forces. If you fail, you go back to the academy for another year, or are put into the reserves, in which you go through 5 years redoing basics and doing missions, although at the end you are promoted automatically to Chunin. But the missions they do are non-combat missions. Also, this test has a 66% failure rate. Anyway, meet me at Training Ground 7 at 6 tomorrow for the test. Kakano explained the meaning, and as predicted, the look on Ino and Sasuke's face was highly amusing. Unfortunately Naruto and Sai already knew of the test, so they looked bored as Kakano explained the meaning of the test. After Kakano shined away, Naruto turned to Sai. "See you at Kurenai-chan's training ground?" After Sai nodded an affirmative and began drawing very quickly in his book, Naruto focused his chakra in the form of 2 wings on his back and leapt off the academy roof. Hearing Ino's startled shout behind him, Naruto grinned as the chakra quickly focused into solid wings that were attached to his back and he flew away towards Training Ground 8. Back on the roof, Sasuke was reflecting on how much Naruto had changed in the space of 2 days. Now he was even claiming to have 3 bloodlines. "I will have that power, Obi, and if you will not give it to me then I will take it." The next morning, 8:30. The next morning Naruto and Sai casually walked into Training Ground 7 2.5 hours after they were asked to be there, and ignored Ino berating them for being so late. Finally it got to a point where Naruto got annoyed. "Ino, how can we be late if Ne-chan isn't even here yet?" he said to try and stop Ino's shouts. And it worked. She couldn't respond because she didn't have an adequate response to Naruto's comment, so she asked another question to try and figure out the enigma that was the new Naruto. "Why do you call her that? She isn't related to you." "Nei-chan is Nei-chan," Naruto responded, not giving anything away, as Ino was a massive gossip. "Hey, sorry I'm late guys, it seemed that Kanako had arrived. I got lost on the road of life." "If you got lost, then how did you find your way again?" Naruto asked, not really caring for the answer, as both he and Sai knew that Kanako had slept in late like they had. "I followed you back to her house," Kanako replied, smiling. "That is so cliched Nei-chan," Sai put in. "Obviously we shouldn't start a band, it would be terrible," Naruto concluded finally. "Anyway, onto the test, follow me. Your task is to get these 3 bells off of me within 3 hours. If you don't get a bell then you will be sent back to the academy, as there are 4 of you so we can always afford to send one back," Kanako said before tying the bells to her belt. "Your time begins now." Sasuke and Ino both immediately rushed off into the bush, knowing that competing against a Jounin, one had to use tactics that were not straightforward. Meanwhile Sai and Naruto just relaxed and sat down against a tree, where Naruto brought out his violin and began to play. "Shouldn't you two be like, helping your teammates through the exam?" Kanako asked. "We'll get them out of their situations after you have defeated them, and see if they respond well enough, which is unlikely," Sai explained in a relaxed manner. Kanako's only response was to sweat drop. Half an hour later Sasuke got impatient and threw several kunai at Kanako, before moving forward and engaging her in taijutsu. And although Sasuke was the best in their age group discounting Naruto and Sai, Kanako was a Jounin who was several years older, had a lot more experience and was simply, a lot better. Sasuke, although he got close enough to actually touch one of the bells soon, got the message, moving back and performing, fire style, Grand Fireball Jutsu. Everyone was slightly shocked that an academy graduate had enough chakra to perform such a technique, before Naruto and Kakano remembered that it was a rite of passage for the Uchiha clan. When the fire dissipated, Sasuke was arrogant enough to think that Kakano had been incinerated by his technique and smirked. Before the ground below him burst open and he was dragged by his ankles into the ground, with only his head remaining above ground. Kakano then rose from the ground in front of him and told him that although he was very good for a Genin, there was a reason that she was a Jounin, before walking off into the bushes after Ino. Naruto sighed before putting his violin away and saying, "Come on, we better go dig him out, as much as neither of us want to." As they dug Sasuke out of the ground, he didn't say a word, but as soon as he was out, he spat, "I don't want nor need help from Udobi, for Uchiha never lose." "Wow, so much for being polite and saying thank you. He also sounds scarily delusional, I mean, Uchiha never lose?" Sai commented with a frown. Kakano returned, saying, "That Yamanaka is a fangirl to the point of it being scary. I put her in a genjutsu showing her dead family, and she gets out of it fine. Then I put her in a genjutsu showing a dead Sasuke and she immediately collapses and starts crying. It's just sad, because it shows that she cares more about Sasuke than her family." "Actually, can you two go out and tie the two to the stumps here? I think it's time we give them a little demonstration," Kanako ordered. "Sure thing Nei-chan," the two of them chirped. Within 15 minutes Ino and Sasuke had been tied to 2 of the 3 stumps and were about to wake up. As the 2 pairs of eyelids worked themselves open they came to the realization that they were in a highly uncomfortable position, with them being strapped to something in a way that meant their arms were secured and their shuriken and kunai out of reach. After she was sure that the 2 had woken up and were watching alertly, Kanako addressed the 2. "Now as you have both been missing the meaning of the test, I have arranged a demonstration that will give a hint. If at least one of you grasps the meaning of the test before the demonstration is over, all 4 of you will be given another chance after lunch for you to retrieve the bells. If not, then we shall have lunch and I shall decide who will be sent back to the academy." "But since Sai is only an attaché, shouldn't that mean that he should be sent back if the 3 of us fail?" Ino objected. "Are you suggesting putting someone else's head on the chopping block to try and cover your own failures? Those are the words of a coward." Kanako was furious that an academy graduate would even suggest such a thing. "Especially when he has skills greater than yours and Sasuke's combined and almost as great as my own." "Now if you would, Naruto, Sai," she said, calm once more. The 2 facing her nodded and as one, moved to attack her. To Sasuke and Ino, they were little more than blurs that occasionally launched jutsu and kunai. Sai and Naruto shepherded Kanako into a corner and began to launch taijutsu attack after taijutsu attack at her. Lightning, Fire and earth jutsu streak across what looked to be a battleground in front of the two before the dust finally settled with Kanako holding a kunai to size in Naruto's throats. Then they nodded to one another and relaxed. Ino was awed. It had seemed like every single hit had been thrown with the intent to kill, and the devastation caused by the fight was massive. Trees were toppled, massive craters were steaming slightly, and dust had been thrown everywhere. Is this what shinobi were truly capable of? She then thought of her own skills and promised to train harder, no matter what Sasuke wanted. Sasuke looked murderous. It seemed that no matter how much he trained, there was someone stronger than him. And although he could put up with Kanako being stronger than him, the fact that Naruto, the class Tobi, was also stronger than him was galling. He needed that power to kill Itachi, and he vowed that he would have it, no matter the consequences. As Kanako walked over to the two graduates that were tied to the stumps, she asked, "So why did they do better at fighting me than you two did?" There was a long silence for about 5 minutes before Ino remembered a saying that she had heard her father say one time. "Konoha is strong because we take care of our own, whether out in the field or at home. That is why Konoha is the strongest of the 5. Ino had realized the meaning of the test. It was a test to see whether they could work together as a team. The bells were merely a distraction from the true aim. The true meaning of the test is teamwork. She spoke up. Correct. The true test was to see if you could work together. If you cannot rely on your teammates, then whom can you rely on? After all, they will be facing the possibility of death alongside you. Now, time for lunch, she announced the last part while bringing out 4 bento boxes. Naruto, Sai, do not feed or cut down the other 2. This is as punishment, for they forgot the most cardinal of shinobi rules in Konoha. She then stood and walked off into the forest. As soon as she was out of sight, Naruto opened another of the bento boxes and offered half of it to Ino. But she said not to. Ino objected. But if the test was over she wouldn't care, and if it was still going then she would applaud that I am ignoring the rules to help my teammate, Naruto reasoned before giving her some of the food as Sai did the same with Sasuke. He's right, you know. All turned to see Kanako watching them from the tree line. I was exactly the same as you once, Sasuke, thinking that your teammates would only slow you down and that the mission was all that was important. I was a fool. But enough of that, you passed, you can cut them down. I will report your success to the Hokage. She disappeared in the sunshine. I will see you guys later, Naruto said. He had a project to work on. The current project that Naruto was working was really just an adjustment to his ninjatos. He was planning to engrave seals on them to give them special abilities like the swords of the 7 Mist Swordsmen. Along with making them unbreakable and putting seals on the sheaths to make them able to hold his blades while being physically smaller. Small advantages like that could make all the difference while in the heat of battle. He also had Kage Bunshine practicing fighting with only one of his ninjatos while forming single-handed hand seals with the other. On a positive hand, he had finally been able to start practicing his Makuten chakra exercises, as it seemed he had finally found the balance needed in combining his water and earth chakra. Although his training time would be cut down because of the time he had to spend with his Junon team. Speaking of which, at the end of the demonstration he thought he saw a flicker of determination in Ino that he hadn't seen before. Hopefully she was set on being a proper kunoichi now. Kanako sunshined into the Hokage's office slightly later than the rest of the team senseis. Although she was lazy to those with lower ranking than her, anything equal or above she tried not to be as late as she had been while acting as Kakashi. Team 1 Team 6 have failed Kakano. Have yours? The Hokage asked rather irritably. In fact, no they didn't. The past, if only just, but I will need to talk to you more later, Kakano said, surprising the majority of the Jounin senseis. Must have been the Uchiha, one remarked, and although a few nodded, those that had spent time in the Anbu or training Naruto knew it wasn't. Teammate passed, although there are certain things I need to clarify, but apart from that it shouldn't be any problem, Kurenai said, from over against the wall next to Anko. As Team 9 is still in circulation under Guy, Team 10? Team 10 passed, although I don't understand why you didn't give me Ino, but clearing up the fangirl shouldn't be too difficult, Asuma grunted before turning back to annoy Kurenai. In that case you can all leave apart from Kakano, who wanted to talk about something. The Hokage directed. After the others had left Hokage turned back to Kakano. Alright, what is it you have to tell me? Hokage-sama. It is clear that Uchiha Sasuke is jealous of the power that Naruto is displaying and unless we tell him the truth soon, he will become even more of a flight risk than he already is. Also he doesn't fit well with anyone else in my team, so I am considering putting him in the reserves. But if I do that, then he becomes even more likely to try and abandon Konoha. And if we put him with a private tutor, with orders to try and teach him as little as possible, then he will quickly grow frustrated," Kakano reported, as she knew that having Sasuke on her team would be a clear negative impact, but trying to keep him loyal was important too. We will keep him on your team for the moment, but if he steps over the line, bring the hammer down on him, understood?" Hiruzen outlined. "Perfectly, Hokage-sama." "Good, now I have to get back to paperwork, which, even with my shadow clones working on it at the same time, is rather tedious." Training Ground 7, 7:30. The next morning, Ino and Sasuke came to the training ground to see hundreds of Narutos doing various training exercises. Some were balancing senbons on their fingers, others were doing taijutsu sparring, others were practicing sword katas, others seemed to be writing or drawing, they couldn't tell. Sasuke clenched his teeth angrily before shouting, "Which one of you is the real Dobi?" All of the clones pointed towards Naruto, who was in the middle of all the different groups, and seemed to be meditating, while sitting on top of a miniature hurricane, with his chakra wings stretched out behind him. Ino looked on in awe, he looked so serene, and if he could do that then he must be really strong. Sasuke, meanwhile, just stomped up to him only for Naruto to open his eyes and release his chakra. He then stepped down off of the hurricane and his wings flared brightly before he said, "Such negative emotion is unbecoming of a shinobi, Uchiha." The coldness in his voice made Ino shiver. It reaffirmed her conclusion that Naruto wasn't someone you wanted to piss off, which Sasuke just did. "You have no right to demand any of my techniques, and you definitely shouldn't piss me off, as you have no idea exactly what I am capable of." "I have every right, as the last of the Uchiha and heir of the Uchiha clan, Konoha's greatest clan, so I demand you give me all your techniques," Sasuke arrogantly proclaimed. Ino cringed. "Due to your arrogance and your attitude, you are currently the member of this team that has the least potential. And your clan was a clan of thieves and liars, stealing other people's hard work in desperation for power." Naruto's voice grew even colder, and Ino felt as if she was in a blizzard. "Ha, as if you would know anything about the greatness of the founding clans of Konoha. Your mother was probably some drunk whore who didn't know who the father." This was all Sasuke managed to get out before a fist drove into his stomach and he was launched into, and through, 3 trees. He fell to the ground after the 3rd tree, and caused a small crater. He was so injured that he couldn't move his head, and he could do nothing but watch as Naruto appeared above him and began raining blows down on his body. Sai, who had just arrived, heard a massive crash and he ran forward to see Ino screaming in horror as Naruto was beating the life from Sasuke. He immediately ran forward, knowing that if he didn't stop Naruto, Sasuke would definitely die, and restrained Naruto. After calming Naruto, till he agreed to stop killing Sasuke at least, he sent an ink messenger bird to Kaneko to explain the situation while he took Sasuke to the hospital using a huge ink eagle. After they had left, Naruto continued to vent his rage on the surrounding trees, as his clones had all finally dispersed and Ino was well out of harm's way. He smashed through quite a few, and Ino just watched in awe and sadness as he continued to punch his fists through tree trunk after tree trunk. Awe because she didn't think he was using any chakra to enhance his strikes, and sadness because she could see how much he suffered not knowing any family. No wonder he regards his close friends as his brothers and sisters, she thought. He must be desperate to know what the feeling of family is like. Kaneko turned up around 10 minutes later and simply looked at the destruction Naruto had wrought before turning to Ino, who was beside her. "So what happened?" "We came in and found Naruto training with hundreds of what looked like clones, and Sasuke got jealous and went up to the real one and began to demand that he give all of his techniques as his right as the last of the Uchiha. Naruto then called the Uchiha clan a bunch of thieves and liars that steal other people's hard work. Sasuke in response called Naruto's mother a whore, and Naruto snapped, and sent Sasuke flying through 3 trees with one punch." Ino said, sad that neither of her teammates could get along. "I knew it would be something along those lines," Kaneko sighed. "You see, that's about the only insult that can anger Naruto that much, everything else just makes him judge you as weak. Once he calms down, go ahead and ask him to help train you, as he calms down pretty quickly when he's trying to help others." Ino nodded, before Kaneko told her that she had to go to the hospital and check in on Sasuke. Much as she thought he was a spoiled brat, she knew that after seeing Naruto getting that angry, he would be injured for quite a long time, though she doubted it would be permanent. Entering the hospital reception, she saw Sai leaning on the wall next to a corridor and walked over to him stiffly. "How is he?" He merely shook his head and said that she'd better see for himself. He then walked with her down the corridor and stopped outside of room 23. Kaneko paled, Room 23 was the pending room for potential long-term patients. Sai opened the door and let her through the door first. She walked into the room to see Tsunade writing notes on a clipboard, and as soon as she saw Tsunade, the head of the hospital, she knew it was bad. "How bad is it?" she asked the Sennin. On a scale of 1 to 10 with 10 being the worst, I would rate it about a 9 to 9.5. Naruto really did a number on the kid. Any idea why he did? According to Yamanaka Ino, who was there at the time, Sasuke called Naruto's mother a whore, Kanako said, wincing at the last part. "Well, that I can understand," Tsunade said understandingly. "Do you know how long he's going to be in here for?" "Definitely a year. At least." Ouch. Ino had been taught by Naruto for a duration of 15 minutes so far, and she had already worked out that he was a bit of a training freak. If he wasn't talking about training, then he was muttering about his projects, and if he wasn't doing that, then he was shouting at her about her training. For the past few minutes she had been attempting the tree climbing exercise while Naruto was writing up a training schedule for her. She could walk up the tree, she just didn't have the amount of chakra necessary for staying up there for a long time, and, as such, Naruto told her to do it until he said stop. Naruto, meanwhile, was giggling at the thought of Ino's face when she saw her training schedule. He had finally made up his mind. When he got to Jounin, he was definitely going to train a group of genins just so he could torture them in training, as his senseis had done to him. 5 minutes later he told Ino to stop and grab a drink before coming over to where he was sitting, which Ino did all too gratefully. Coming over, she accepted the schedule and looked over it, and proceeded to almost choke on the water she had been swallowing, before the flash of a camera blinded her. She then, after recovering from her coughing fit, asked Naruto whether he was insane, to which he just cackled evilly. 2 hours later Kanako and Sai arrived back at the training ground, having had to go to the Hokage's office to explain why Sasuke would be in the hospital for the next year and a half. Hiruzen had been about to give Naruto endless D ranks for 6 months but realized that Naruto had quite successfully delayed his problem of Sasuke being a flight risk, so he let him off. But he did say that Naruto would have to go to Mikoto and explain why he had put her son in hospital for the next 18 months. Both Naruto and Ino accepted the news quite happily when Kanako announced that their team would therefore be comprised of Ino, Sai, and Naruto. Since Ino would be the only one learning the basics, they would be able to get through them relatively quickly and move on to more advanced stuff. It also made it more likely that they would be competing in the Chunin exams in 6 months.